Now. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the very first guest episode of Ikigai with Jennifer Shinkai. I am your host, Jennifer Shinkai, and with me today, all the way from the US of A, is Zane Zumbahlen, my dear, dear friend who I have not seen for too long. And it's so glad that it took us this podcast to get together. Zane has a stellar career. Starting from his very first job walking beans, which I need to ask him about at some point what this job was that I saw in his CV. But 25 years at IBM, including roles in the US, Sweden, and Japan, which is where, of course, I met him. And he's currently, let me read this because it's a long title, the Chief Human Resources and Talent Officer for Cancer Treatment Centers of America. And Zane has always inspired me and struck me as someone who lives his life pretty full throttle with plenty of passion and energy, and is a great mover of people as well. And not just because he's in HR and that's all about people, but just how he manages to inspire. And I remember, Zane, do you remember when we first met?
Oh, please remind me. I should.
I remember very vividly. It was an ACCJ lunch, and you had come from a very difficult meeting with someone about recruitment, and I was the person working for a recruitment company sitting across the table from you. And it was a very interesting conversation. It was actually very positive, and we ended up doing a program together.
Yes.
But then we ended up working very closely on the Deepen the Dialogue gender diversity and gender equality program in Japan. So that's when we got to know each other a lot better. But yes, the reason I asked you to be on the show, the very first guest, so exciting, oh my God, only dogs can hear me now, is about, you've had your experience in Japan, so I know that you've heard about Ikigai, but also because you've always struck me as this person who knows why he's here, knows what he wants to do, and goes around and makes it happen. So yeah, let's dive in, Zane, with maybe you telling people a little bit about this walking beans job and anything else which you think might be useful for our listeners.
So thank you for the time. I'm very excited to be the first guest. Yay. That's really cool. So Zane Zumbahlen, like Jennifer said, varied career across IBM, 13 or 14 jobs over 25 years. And really excited to go to, well, it's a smaller organization, so 4,000 employees with Cancer Treatment Centers of America. Well, they say CTCA, and I'll refer to it as such if it comes up again later in the conversation. But 4,000 employees, and we treat patients who are in their journey with cancer. And you work for companies where what the product is, or the consulting arrangement. This is real clear. We're trying to help people's lives, and you see it every day in every employee. It's just a really cool place to be and something to be part of. So, that'll tie to my Ikigai. But walking beans, that's so funny. I forgot that was
in your profile.
So I was 13 years old, and I grew up in Central Illinois, which is a town of about 4,500 people. Probably 4,000.
The same size as CTCA's employees. Okay, that's good scope.
There you go, exactly. And you did a lot of farm work. So there was detasseling corn, there was, walking beans, which was just this horrible job. So in the middle of summer, 95 to 100 degree heat, high humidity, and you had to wear long sleeve shirts, gloves, full pants, boots, and you went through the field behind a tractor or walking, and you would pull the beans out of the fields, or you would sickle them down. So if you couldn't pull them because they were rooted too deep, you would sickle them. And it was exhausting. It was for, I think, $3 or $4 an hour. So it was poorly paid, utterly exhausting, and brutally bad. And
not your Ikigai then?
It was. I did not find my Ikigai there. But sometimes isn't it so instructive when you see things that you really don't like, how it turns you on to things that you do.
Yeah.
Right. So I knew at that point that I probably didn't want to go into farming. That maybe it would be better if I used my brain than my hands, which unfortunately comes true in a house now. So but it was, you learn the benefit of hard work, but hard work can be applied in many ways, shapes, and forms. So, I found a way to do so with human resources rather than with, farming or manual. So
Right.
yeah, it was really good.
That's awesome. I think that's the first golden nugget there of advice is, it's very powerful to know what you don't like, what you
Sure.
don't want to do. That's a way to reduce and shorten the list, for sure. Yeah. So what are the things which you do enjoy, with using your brain rather than your hands? What's the type of work that helps you get out of bed in the morning?
So, and we're tinkering around with the Ikigai, or you want me to go directly at it?
As you like. Yeah, go for it. Dive in.
So I love trying to shape, shift, and lead an organization from where they're at currently to where they want to try to be. And sometimes, it was fascinating in Japan because you had to find the right way, manner, and method in which to do it at the time. So there were times when I had to be, at the front of the audience and, either lead or be completely vulnerable and talk about how I'd failed. There were times when you pushed people up in front of the audience and you supported and nurtured them, or times when you sat back and you coached behind the scenes. I tried to recognize, you see, in going from point A to point B, I was just a funnel or a conduit from getting there. And I tried to employ whatever method was most applicable at that time to try to do so. So, it brings back, the story of the, Japanese tea ceremony, right? So I won't tell the whole story, but, throughout the process, it was situated us in a scenario that could be interpreted by the tea ceremony guest, but then in the end to fade back into the back of it as if not to exist, which it was just, it's a beautiful story to me. And something that I try to espouse. It doesn't matter what role I play in the conduit, but if I can help get from A to B, then I'm doing my job. Right. And I see it happen, not in, accolades or recognition or something on the back end. I see it in people's eyes. I see it when the change actually strikes or happens and they wake up and they go, or when they feel it in their heart, or they smile with the joy of realizing they can do something they didn't necessarily think they could. So I look for it in the reactive nature of people rather than in the accolade on the back end. I know when I've made a difference, not when somebody says it, but when I feel it from the person or the team with whom I'm engaging.
I'm getting what my coach calls FBGs. Sarah Fuller calls FBGs full body goosebumps with your description there, like just that aha moment, the realization, and it's the experience of being part of creating that's right. when you have that understanding, that moment, that awareness that drives you.
There's a story that is really it very strongly aligns with my Ikigai. If I may share it.
Yes, please do.
So I was in IBM in part of the business that was with a more tenured population, and the job I was given is to go in and work with the management team and fix their mindset. So they were frustrated, disgruntled. The team had been told no many times, so much, in fact, probably so frequently that they stopped asking the question as to what investment they needed or where they could try to change things. So, and they said, Zane, go in and fix that. Great. So, I mean, not a small task for, at the time, a business unit of 13,000 employees.
Right.
So was really just maybe it was less than that at the time, 9,000. But it was a fascinating process because I went in and I started by gathering, what's the current reality. So I ran roundtables with the management team, tried to get an understanding, and humorously, the very first meeting, the first person, I explained who I was, what I was trying to do, and they said, "You're the latest HR weenie to stand in front of us. Why should we trust you or tell you anything?"
Right.
Awesome. We're in it now. So I answered, and I said, "Well, first I'm going to take notes today, and then I'm going to send you those notes, and you're going to tell me if I got it right or wrong." I'm going to do it for the rest of for all the other roundtables. So you're going to see what everybody says. And if I missed anything, or if you thought of something that you didn't realize during the process, then by all means tell me, right? So just add to it. But more importantly, I'm going to take that and I'm going to build that into a summary of actions that need to be taken that are aligned with trying to improve on the areas you told me are broken. And then on a monthly or a quarterly basis, and I did both, but I'm going to give you a summary of what have we done, how have we tried to improve, and what difference is it making? It's kind of a self-assessment, both are we better now, and are we making progress for the future? I said, all right, we'll give you a chance. But then I did it. But where the story comes in with Ikigai, it was, we were rounding out and had established credibility for the actions we were doing. And what I wanted to do is really bring it together to you could argue there was some change being seen, but I needed to go out and get, there were about 650 managers. I wanted to get all of them. Mm. So I thought it would be really good to have a leadership training session. So we called it Lead to Win. It was a full day investment, in 3 of our sites. So we did one on a, basically, I think Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then drove 4 hours to the next one, 3 hours to the next one, 5 hours.
It was
awesome. But so we called it Lead to Win. And it was such an important meeting because we had an external speaker. We talked about, leadership and mentality, but the most important thing we did throughout that day, and then I'm going to rewind to the Ikigai comment. I guess I'm telling the story out of order in essence, but the most important thing we did in that day was we had 14 business models, business cases that we posted up on the wall, big boards. And then under it, we had takeaways. So we had an investment in site restoration. We had a $3 million retention program. We had an investment in training and development. We had a variety of things that were applicable to what the management team told us was important. Below that, we had the rip and read of a takeaway of a one-pager. Here's how you build a business case, the situation, with whom we worked, what was required, the investment that was needed, how we substantiated that with the ROI, what the action taken was, and what some learnings were on the back end. Literally, you could take the one that was most analogous to what the manager or the management team felt the problem was and take it with them and then replicate it. So the beautiful outcome of that was we had about 40 managers volunteer to be a sounding board. They became the group that heard the cases being made across all managers and employees, and they would improve or approve it. They would help justify the financial investment, and they would take it to the leadership team. So it became a self-propagating team. Now I'm going to rewind to where Ikigai came in. So when I see opportunity, it comes to me, vision, right? So I kind of saw this possible. So like, I guess it was about 2 months. I think we had 2 months of planning, maybe 3. And I was told that it couldn't happen by every member of my team and a couple of members of the leadership team. We're not going to get the investment, there's not enough time, we're not going to hit the right mark. And you can't necessarily be deterred by no, right? So, if there's the right intent and the right objective, and again, I go back to having seen A and B, I saw a B with an empowered management team that we were able to, in the end, to realize as you keep pushing and building content and substantiating the rationale, getting a couple of approvals, I had a team of 22 HR members at that point, and they start realizing this is going to happen kind of, like it or not. I mean, they weren't supportive. They just thought it couldn't be done. So, and it'd probably been 10 years since anything like that had been tried or completed successfully. So they kind of bought in, and, slowly but surely, it started to manifest, and we made it real, and it just became this, a couple of weeks before, there was a real sense of enthusiasm, but you go from people not thinking it's possible and refuting it or fighting against it to getting on board. And then after it was done, there was my Ikigai. After it was done, and they realized that we were able to complete something they thought not possible. And in the end, this was like kind of on an individual level and a team level. On the back end of that, when the team went beyond what they thought their current capability, then you start to question, what is my limit? where can I go? If I've gone beyond what I thought to be my limit, do I have a limit? And there's this, euphoria of having completed something they thought not possible, and this fear of, if I did that, what else am I holding myself back from? And it's such an amazing, I mean, seeing their faces and the jubilation they had, but also I think it was fear, one, for what their limits were and not realizing it, and two, what I might come up with next. So, but
I like that.
I call that the magic of management. When you get somebody individually to think about where their fears lie and what they think not possible, and help, coach, nurture, and sometimes push them to a point where they achieve it. And then they're in this boundaryless condition of not knowing what their future limits might be. And that is an amazing spot in which to play and encourage people.
I love that. I'm really hesitant to put my mic back on because I don't know if you can hear the beautiful sounds of Japan in the background there. They're delivering the gas for people's heaters because winter is coming. But I really like this idea that you've said about there's the jubilation, this experience, right? That this is done. And that's a wonderful moment. But it's very hard to kind of place your life and your energies around the moment of success. But I really like this idea of the fear of the place where you realize that maybe the limits that I thought I had are not the limits I actually have.
Well, don't we find that to be true with frequency? So right. we all put some form of limitation on ourselves. I mean, it's gotten to the point where, and it's true for this webcast, when a friend will say, hey, would you mind doing? I just say yes. So I know it happened in Japan for a women's conference, and they were asking, they said, do you mind? And I said, I'll do it. They went, you don't even know what I'm going to ask you yet. I said, well, technically it doesn't necessarily matter because you cared enough to ask me, so I'm in. They're like, okay. So, I try, very hard. I'm diligent about trying not to do self-imposed limits. So, and just stretch into it. And sometimes I fail, and that's fine too. So, and what you learn, earlier, I talked about walking beans and realizing that's not where I wanted to be. Sometimes it's the failure that says, now what can I learn from that, and how can I fix and tweak it and make it better next time?
Right.
So, and what's funny, the more often I fail, the better I get at it. So, because when we fail, the first thing you do is get into your head and like, oh my God, why did I do that? I'm never doing this again. We're all emotional beings. But it's funny because after you fail frequently, you drop the emotion. So, it still hits you, but it hits you faster, leaves you quicker, and you start getting into remedy mode and, what went wrong? What could I do? And can I go back at this quickly and make it right or better, or do it better next time? So, right. I'm a big proponent of failing with frequency, because the more I do it, the better I get at it, and the shorter it lasts.
Right. And so you can speed up the cycle, right, to
yes.
the next failure, or
right.
or perhaps a success. Who knows what will come
right.
in? Go on.
The first thing I tell people when they fail is congratulations.
Yes.
Right. I mean, there's no greater learning. There's no greater learning in your career than failing and learning from it. Now, if you allow it to stop you and you get frozen there, that's a problem. Yeah. Right. But, and I'm hoping people don't do that, and I encourage them through it. But I do start with the congratulations.
That's a great piece of advice, because I think in the coaching that I've done around Ikigai and the different, workshops, both for corporates as well as for, private individuals, there is often this hesitation, this fear, like, what if I try to change and I fail, or lots of these what ifs. So how would you, given your life experiences and how you think about your Ikigai, the person who is between here and where they want to be, how would you coach or advise someone who's in that kind of what if I fail mindset?
We all wonder. So know that you're not alone. I literally just had one of my employees say, listen, I'm just faking it till I make it. because I mean, I'm waiting for the day when they figure out that I can't do this job. And I went,
Yeah.
so am I. I mean, it's true. It was true in Japan. It was true prior to Japan. But so advice. I try to stay objective focused. I try to disengage my ego, which is tricky sometimes. We all have it. I'm either going to succeed, or rather than fail, if I'm failing, I'm going to learn from it. So I make a conscious, you can play through different games. You can say, well, what's the worst that could possibly happen? And that's helpful. And I've encouraged people to do that depending on where they're at with the risk aversion. That's a good early stage. Once you start failing more often, you give up on that piece of it, but that's a very good starting point. So what's the worst that could happen, and thinking through, the upside downside, and usually the worst is probably not that significant. So, but I'm such a big proponent of trying something. You can put the right amount of thought into it, but don't let the fear of failure stigmatize you from taking that step. And sometimes it's like just stepping into a pool. The water might be cold, it might not be, but once you're in and have made that conscious decision to go, everything gets easier. You get stuck more on, do I want to jump? Do I not, so the longer you wait, the less likely you are to jump in the water.
Right.
So I would encourage either play through what's the worst case that could happen, or, if you're stuck on it, give yourself a time parameter, depending on the situation. Maybe it's 24 hours, maybe it's 2 hours. I'm either going to do it or I'm not going to do it. And at the end of 2 hours, I'm in, or I'm going to back away because I don't feel like I'm prepared enough, or whatever the case might be. But then give yourself, a day to get back and get right back in front of the thing again. Right. So sometimes it works to give yourself a mental time bound lapse to say at that. So I've got to go at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think that's quite helpful as well about sort of some of the decision making which comes up around Ikigai, whether you're going to need to change your role internally, or change something about, there's a dissatisfaction with something which is going on in your daily life. Whilst you're doing that research about what this new, the something different might look like, it can also be quite helpful to give, okay, this is research period until, the end of February.
Right.
And then I'm going to make a decision, but I do not need to make a decision right now. And I think that can be quite helpful when people are struggling between that, like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? Well, I'm just in research now. It's not decision making. So I just need to get as much information as possible on this, and then make a decision. But you just reminded me with your jumping into the pool. I think you have a story about like being a mentor with right? That's just reminded me that we were talking about briefly. And I think that's connected to some of these ideas around energy, Ikigai, taking risks, doing something that's really calling you strongly. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I assume you're referring. I'll tell a story. I think it's the one. If it's not, then
if it's not, I'm sure it'll be a good one anyway.
So I love mentoring. I just, because it goes back to, seeing potential in people and helping them strive for and realize it. Yeah. So I had an introductory meeting with a young woman years ago who was an intern for IBM at the time. And it's funny because we were talking, and you could tell she was hungry or motivated, but also there was a level of fear, risk, or uncertainty there. So, and I said, well, so I try to actively listen and figure out, where they're coming from, what they're about, what might be accelerants to their success or inhibitors. And so I was sensing an aversion to risk or fear, a fear or an aversion to risk. And I said, do me a favor, tell me, what do you dream? What's your dream job? And she said, well, I'd like to be a motivational speaker. And that, if somebody's more risk averse and they say, they want to be a really good, author, or something where it's more self and to yourself and personal study and perseverance, that's one thing. But a motivational speaker, so how do you feel about being in front of a large audience? And she goes, it petrifies me. I'm like, well, these don't match up. You know, I said, the only way you're a good motivational speaker is if you're truly vulnerable. So you have to not only be in front of an audience, but you've got to open up and really share of yourself and, you know, your risk, your fear, your, to really impact an audience. And it was funny because I said, so what else scares you? And she goes, well, I'm afraid to tell you anything, but heights. I'm like, awesome. Because you're going skydiving. And she goes, no, I'm not. like this just uber definitive answer. I'm like, all right, so then what if you're not going skydiving, I tell you, I encourage you to skydive, because if you do so, nothing else is fearful. Right? Because jumping out of a plane and, kind of, because I've done it twice, right? Jumping out of a plane and saying, I could die on the back end of this, it kind of puts everything else into perspective. Nothing else is necessarily that significant. So she was adamant. I got it. So I said, what I'd like you to do for the rest of the summer, and she had about 70 days of the internship, I would like you to do something new or different every single day. Because over a 30-day period, it becomes habitual. So you become used to taking a risk or doing something out of your ordinary. And she kind of looked at me and she's like, are you serious? And why would you make me do that? I'm like, technically, I'm not making you do anything. I'm encouraging you because you tell me your aspirations, but you also that you have an aversion to risk. So I'm encouraging you. If you want, I can mentor you and we can try this out. And she said, all right, fine. Like, that doesn't sound like you're all in. Yes, I'll do it. Okay. And you want to do it? Yes, I want to do it. Fine. So then 3 days go by, I don't hear from her. So I'm like, listen, I'm the head of HR for IBM Japan. I'm pretty busy. If you're serious, you gotta start talking to me. So she's like, I just didn't think you'd follow up. I didn't think you were serious. So then we start. So every day for the next, I think it was about 30 days.
Yeah.
Maybe 40. She sent me what she did new that day. Some of them were good, some were easy, some were harder, and I encouraged her to go a little bigger every once in a while, not every day, but a little bigger every once in a while. And it was amazing. So she was fundamentally shifting throughout this process and becoming a different person, more risk-oriented, less fearful. But then she broke down. She's like, I just can't do this anymore. It's driving me crazy. I'm like, okay, then renegotiate, right? There's nothing that says we can't strike a new balance. What is it that's causing you the angst right now? She said, well, it's the daily reporting. I'm like, fine. So what would work for you? So don't get stuck where you're failing, so renegotiate. Like what is it that is actually the sticking point, and then twist it. So she said it was the daily reporting. I'm like, all right, how about we do weekly reporting? And she goes, really? That'd be great. I'm like, well, yeah, but you're still taking daily risks. So she said, oh, I know, I've got that. Right. Yeah. So I'll do the daily risks, but trying to send you a note every night of what I did and what I learned, it's just gotten too much.
Yeah.
Got it. So we renegotiated, she kept going, which, so she ended up just amazing. So you go from one of the most shy, quiet interns of about 25 we had in IBM to the end of the summer when they did a report out to all of the HR leadership, to the CHRO of IBM and her direct reports. So about 12 people in the room, and she was the lead presenter. So there were two teams. She was, can you imagine that? From too shy to really open up, but saying she wanted to be a public speaker.
Yeah, right.
To then, being the front and center and talking to the CHRO of IBM, who is, pretty senior and powerful and intimidating. And you know how she started the presentation?
Tell me.
She showed a picture of her having gone skydiving the day before. Right?
I knew this punchline from everyone else. Yeah.
I was so excited. So, she I guess it was on a Tuesday. So she went skydiving on a Sunday before she presented on a Tuesday.
Wow.
And, it was this, the motivation, the Ikigai in me just went nuts, right? Because it was this woman who said her dreams, but knew at that point she couldn't accomplish them because she would have been held back by fear, just embracing such change and adventure every given day to the point where she did exactly what she was most fearful of. And it changed her as a person. She became a consultant with IBM. She went on to get a full-time job. She, traveled. It was amazing. It was an amazing transformation of an individual. And so that plays to what I love seeing. How can you help somebody realize their dreams? Her A and B, her B of, I want to be a motivational speaker is much, I mean, I don't even know that it's much of a stretch anymore. I mean, it's much more likely now based on the evolution that she went through than it would have been, had she not done so.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, there's so many things in
I wish
that.
I wish I could show the picture, because that's, of her jumping out of this plane, having this smile. I mean, the first picture was fear. But the next picture was this enormous grin with her and the instructor and the plane behind her. I was just, I mean, it's one of the best pictures I have in all my years in working.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I love that a couple of things come out from the story. So Ken Moggy talks about the power of starting small with Ikigai. Just doesn't need to be like, if you go from day one to skydiving, or day one to like, I'm going to do a motivational speech in front of, in Tokyo Dome, whatever. Well, probably that's not going to happen logistically. Who would book you? But I don't know. But it's too much, right? It's to start small, do this consistent little things. And I love that Moggy Sensei talks about there doesn't need to be a loud fanfare, right? It's just gradual, and the things that you kind of know already just grow stronger and stronger each day, and kind of leaning into it. And that brings me back to the question of sort of how you discovered this Ikigai, this idea of getting people from A to B. Was that something which crept up on you, flash of inspiration, or like, did it just emerge when you looked backwards, like, oh, hang on, I see the places where I've been most myself, I've been most engaged?
Can I give you a guess?
Yeah.
It was failure.
Right.
So the very first employee I had was when I was, I think, 4 years in the business, three years in the business, and I was given an intern. So I had somebody working for me for the summer, and I literally broke them. They broke down and said, "You're insane. You push too hard. You work too crazy. There's nobody who can keep up with you, and you expect somebody's going to do work exactly as hard as you do, and come up with the ideas you do." That, and I mean, they literally were shaking and crying as we had this conversation. And it was my first time to manage anybody. I was like, wow, this is not how I want to lead. This, I don't want to be this kind of person who, because the thing was, they were so good, right? They really were exceptionally strong, and I didn't nurture that or facilitate it or handle it well. So, I apologized and I asked him to give me another chance. But then it became a discussion of, pausing, checking in, recognition, engaging in decision-making. It really taught me how to be a manager and a leader. Right. But through that and through subsequent roles, so at that point, he started to blossom, and then I saw, this is kind of how it works. So then, the first time I became a manager, I was investing in the team, and, I wouldn't ask them to do anything I wouldn't do. That included running a salary program where, where Bob and I were at the facility until 3 a.m. together. We're leaving, and I asked him if he wanted me, I could take you to Denny's, Bob, if you want, but I left with them. So as I invested more, that was the evolutionary part of it, right? So it was failure that kind of woke me up, and the evolutionary part was the more I invested and the more I entrusted and pulled them in and engaged them in the dialogue, the more I saw them blossom into it. So, it continued the evolution through time. So it was, kind of a, early onset from failure and seeing opportunity arise. And then, what I realized is the bigger the role I got, well, a couple of things happened. As you climb in an organization, you're increasingly asked to do more, bigger, harder decisions with less and less information. So it's a fascinating phenomenon, right? Because you should get more data, but sometimes the data doesn't exist. So you have to trust your instincts and gut more often, but it also gave me the opportunity to trust the team and to count on them more. So it was, you know, so that was another important learning, that, you know, the more I climbed up the ladder, the more I had to pull the team with me and trust them and, you know, engage, you know, and try to drive.
Right. Interesting. And I really appreciate that, as having you as the first guest actually on this podcast, is a lot of times with Ikigai, there's something in the myths or the production. I don't know why it's like, okay, in order to live a life of purpose, you either need to be, you know, go and work for an NGO, NPO, or you need to be an artist, or there has to be, it's not something basically that comes up a lot with a corporate career, right? And this idea that you can align your personal Ikigai, your personal reason for just being on this planet, and the things that you do exceptionally well, that are making a difference, having an impact, and that make you feel alive when you're doing them, that you can align that with big business. And business doesn't really come much bigger than IBM, from that, you know, that perspective of corporate, right? So what do you say to these people who say you can't have your Ikigai whilst working for a large corporation?
I would counteract that with a number of other sayings, right? So, you know, find the job you love, and then you don't work a day in your life.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like I was lucky to find my purpose. I've enjoyed and loved every job I've done. You know, somebody asked me what was my favorite. It's really hard. I mean, Japan was beautiful, exceptional. You know, it's funny, and there's the anxiety or the fear that comes with, well, what if I failed this time? Well, I took on a training program in Japan to try to shift the IBM sales culture to be more provocative and customer centric. And it was, my team came in. So three of my leaders came in and said, you're going to die. You've committed too much. You've committed too much. You've obligated yourself, and we see what you're trying to do, and we don't think it's feasible. We're going to help you. And I started to cry because they were right. They were spot on, and I was really stuck on it, and I was probably a little stuck on ego, not wanting to ask for help. But they saw it, and it was the most beautiful, most touching gesture, probably, you know, one of the most beautiful touching gestures in my career, where you know, where they came in and said, we're going to lean in and help you. Like,
right.
Arigato gozaimasu.
Indeed. And just being able to,
while I'm crying, wiping my tears away. So, but it just says, you know, so I go back, you know, I try to embrace failure, and I take risk, right? So, and in doing so, it was aligned with my objective. It was trying to do something from A to B and shift an organization and do something I thought meaningful. So aligned with my Ikigai. And then lo and behold, little did I know, I needed somebody to lean in and help me out. And without asking, they did so. And, you know, that just, it fills your heart.
Yeah. And that you were also able to accept that help, and in that moment not be still driven, right? Like, oh no, I got this, to actually be able to say, no, I haven't got this at all. You're quite right.
I didn't have it.
do not have this. Yeah. And just even hearing the introduction of the program there, I was like, oh, that sounds like a pretty tough ask. So
well, I mean, the work we did on Deepen the Dialogue, right? I mean, you know, I would talk to women in IBM Japan, and you know, it's funny because I would say, why haven't you been willing to take the promotion? And we would have these, you know, well, I'd like to be able to do more of the job perfectly or correctly. I'm like, okay. So, and then it was humorous because I would say, well, could you and I said, well, what about your male counterparts? Oh, well, they'll take the job no matter what. You know, they don't care. They'll do it. I'm like, so I'm the head of HR. My job is to put the best person in the role, not the one who's most willing to take the promotion. so let me ask, are you or your male counterparts better? every head went down and would not look at me in the eye, would not answer the question.
Right.
But that created opportunity. So I said, what, assuming women and men are equal, but then we're promoting, and this isn't true for IBM. IBM actually did quite a good job of equal pay and, promotion, but still there's always opportunity. And I started thinking, and I shared those things externally. I was vulnerable and took risk and said, here's what we found in the surveys and the roundtables that we run. And that became gravitational. I mean, people said, that's the experience we're having. And then you and I started getting into a discussion, and we started a quarterly forum, a quarterly workshop where we brought people together and looked at best practices and who was doing it well and who was in the beginning stages and what might help them. And we ended up building a playbook that, how can we try to advocate for women in the workforce across the breadth of Japan? And, we both saw an opportunity, and we really put, some effort and, extensive thought into how do we do this right?
Yeah. And trying to really just make that open source document rather than hiding the best practices. Like, it makes for a better society. Right. So let's share what's working for us, and what's not, right? And just being very, very open about those things so that people had more information. Yeah. Oh, well, I don't want this to go into a tale of what's happened in Japan since. COVID has not been kind to women across the world in work. So not just in Japan. So it's been a tough year, I think, for that particular topic around diversity and inclusion. But what I wanted to ask you was, we've really, really focused on your work as you're driving Ikigai, but how about other things in your life in terms of, like how you keep the energy to do this? These are big projects. Other things which make you leap out of bed in the morning.
So a couple of things, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at, I was jotting down a point or two.
Yeah.
So, I referenced earlier, the higher you go, the more you're making decisions with less information. The other thing is, you, by default, the corollary statement on the, on the other side is you have to trust your gut more and more often. So I am trusting my gut with frequency on, individual team and organizational levels. So, there are times when things may not feel perfectly accurate, but it feels right. So I've stopped second guessing myself and just if it feels right. So I've got to trust that I've got 25 years of trying to be, a change agent and thoughtful and provocative and emotionally intelligent. So I've given up on second guessing, and I try to trust my gut more and more often. The other thing is, the higher up you go, the more risk you have to take, right? So if I'm not scared, if I'm not doing something that makes me kind of weak in the knees and, stressed, who else is going to do it? Right. So, I mean, if I'm not doing it on a monthly or at least a quarterly basis, I'm not doing my job, because then, if I'm playing it safe, then that's the environment I'm creating for anybody that I work with or anybody I manage.
Right.
So I have to, by default, keep my energy up and stay out of my comfort zone with too much frequency. Granted, I mean, during COVID, none of us are really in our comfort zone. One of my, just to sidestep for a moment on COVID, one of my greatest fears is that, so we all recognize we probably don't have the workforce we need for the future. And COVID's been, horrible for a variety of reasons, but you think about how to shift for the future. And one of the biggest things is getting people out of their comfort zone. One of my biggest fears is that as soon as we get a vaccine and things seem to get to a better state physically, we're going to go, oh, thank God, I can go right back to my old routine.
Yes.
But boy, I'm not sure those old routines weren't necessarily working for us.
Yeah.
So that I'm fearful that we're going to, just, hop back to comfort, rather than like, I'm
which wasn't actually that comfortable for many people, right? It wasn't that comfortable. So is it comfort? Right. Is it status quo? Is it just the known?
Well, it's the known, right?
It's the known,
so,
right?
So to your point, so I know I challenge myself to stay in risk. I trust my gut more and more often. Really it's the timing was fortuitous for me. I'd never really been oriented towards meditation or journaling. And I started that really at the beginning of the year.
Right.
So it was interesting timing, because as COVID really hit, I was reasonably grounded, and so yeah, I guess the third thing I was doing is when I was journaling is I was also focused on gratitude. So it became habitual for me. You do 30 days and then, so I was waking up every day for a period of time thinking about the three things for which I'm most grateful. Yeah. And boy, that just shifts your perspective through the day. And I don't overtly do it now. It's kind of ingrained in my process. So as I'm getting up and starting to do things, I'm kind of like, okay, kids are waking up. So kids are alive. Yes. I'm married. Perfect. And, I've got a bunch of meetings today. Hoorah.
Hurrah. Yeah. People need me.
So you asked about personal practice. So gratitude has been huge for me, especially through COVID, because we can be victim to the environment, or we can just accept it because it is literally what it is. And we kind of don't have a whole lot of control over it. So accepting what is, gratitude, and meditation and journaling have all been really helpful practices. So you bundle that with risk and, the other things I referenced earlier. And, that's been most helpful for me, trying to be the leader I am.
Right. Amazing. Well, I know that we're coming to the end of our time together. It's raced by. Is there anything that you would like to say as your final takeaway for the listeners?
Hopefully you've heard it through the discussion, but I guess the final thing is be the change you want to see in the world. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? So, I saw an opportunity with, where we weren't where we needed to be with women in Japan, and I leaned into that. I referenced the story with the young woman who was an intern, and I saw an opportunity there, and I didn't have to lean into it, but I knew that I could, and I could try to make a difference. So, sometimes when you think about change, the story with Deepen the Dialogue, that's big, right? But it doesn't have to be big. So with the young woman, it was just one-on-one, or, for me to stay out of my comfort zone, I was trying to, do something new in Japan every day. So it was, take a path home, or, eat at a different place, or try a different food item, or meet a different person or a new person. So start small. I mean, if you care about environmental efforts, pick up trash, don't be intimidated by it need to be a grandiose, show of faith or effort. It could just be small. So, I started there, and, I tied it to my philosophy of risk and other things. So I try to make it bigger and bigger, but it doesn't need to be. I mean, I started with small pieces and then just continue to grow it.
To build on that in a virtuous upward cycle. We hope. Absolutely. So I love that. Don't be overwhelmed by the size of the challenge. Just do one small thing each day. And that it reminds me of that other thing, which is, don't compare somebody's middle to your beginning. So, like starting a podcast, and I'm going to look, and there's all these amazing people with just gorgeous production values and very slick. And it's like, well, why don't I just start and just do something and see what happens? And then we'll see where it goes. Because, when those people started, they didn't start where they are now as well.
And I got to be a guest.
I know. They didn't get Zane on their podcast. So that's amazing. So thank you so much for sharing your story, your knowledge, your expertise. And it was really great.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, it was really great to connect with you. So thank you very much.